Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube Astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and the death of legendary country music artist Joe Diffie. Now, as many of you may have heard, renowned country music artist Joe Diffie has passed away due to complications of the coronavirus. Very sad and very tragic that this happened. People will constantly be talking well about the flu being responsible for more deaths, like in the same time period or what have you, or being responsible for more deaths than the coronavirus. I'm assuming they're talking about in a same time period. But it's interesting. I don't know how many of you noticed this lately, but these legendary people, these celebrities, you're hearing about a number of them that are dying from the coronavirus, but yet you're not hearing about the people that have perished from the flu. Now, whether it's because the coronavirus is just getting more claim and attention than the flu, I don't know. But it just seems a little bit odd. Maybe the coronavirus might be a little bit more serious than people are really saying it is or think it is. But anyway, back to Joe Diffie's chart. I wanted to talk about the thing about his chart. When I noticed, I'm going to talk about some natal placements and transits that may be tied in to the death due to this coronavirus. Now, sadly, I think it was like 61 when he died. I looked at I didn't have his time of birth, but I improvised like I've done on a number of occasions and did a solar sunrise chart where I put the sun at the same position as his ascendant. He's a Capricorn, December 28th, 1958. And the thing about Joe Diffie is that when I look at his chart, the first thing, man, I'm looking at the fourth house cusp in it, and being in Aries, it's no surprise in that latter part of his life, which I would say he was in at being 61 when he passed away. It's the simple fact that he was really more spry, I'd say, beyond his years. Being you see, Capricorn, his sun in Capricorn. Capricorn energy can be a little bit paradoxical. They're not as paradoxical as Aquarius, but the energy that I see with Capricorn, they seem like they're older when they're younger, but they're younger when they're older, and when they age very gracefully, and they often have a little more youthful exuberance than people think when they become older, despite having a generally stern and serious disposition. And having the Aries on the fourth house cusp, even though I understand it's a solar sunrise chart, but still, that could show some spryness in one's latter part of life and some enthusiasm at that time period, in that general time of someone's life. Now, it could also, when I looked at some indicators in his chart that are tied in, though, with the death to the coronavirus and some issues associated with it. As far as his natal chart goes, well, one thing I noticed is that he had Mercury in Sagittarius near the 12th house cusp, and we have Mercury by the 12th house cusp, even if it's conjunct from the 11th, it could indicate some breathing issues, limitations, restrictions. Mercury is associated with breathing. Pisces on the 3rd house cusp can indicate some dissolving or dissipation of breathing. And when you're talking about a thing about this too is he also had transit Neptune was at the time was close to his third, not far from his 3rd house cusp. And when you're talking about transit, Neptune and Pisces right now, I do see this as one of the main culprits as far as this coronavirus goes, as far as how it's impacted people collectively, because when you look at Neptune can be connected with diseases, and the zodiac sign Pisces, of course, can be associated with diseases that can't be, illnesses, debilitations that can't be eradicated. And when you're having that transit and it's near your 3rd house cusp, that can be an issue with that might be causing some breathing issues, because the 3rd house, of course, can be associated with breathing. The 3rd house in astrology corresponds with Gemini, and Gemini energy, of course, can be breathing issues. He also had, in the solar sunrise chart, Speaking of Gemini, Gemini falls on the sixth house cusp, and that could be an indicator of health debilitations that are associated with breathing, since Gemini again can be associated with that. That ruler is near his 12th house cusp, Mercury, and that could be limitations in health in general. The thing, and keep in mind, Mercury is also being in Sagittarius, is also in its detriment, being in Sagittarius. But anyway, another thing that I noticed as far as his eighth house cusp goes, and of course the eighth house can be associated with death, and it's also connected with viruses as well. In that chart, he does have, I mean, he had Leo on the eighth house cusp, so if there was something, it's not surprising that he died in the thing, not the fact just that he died, but his death was something that gained some notoriety and really in a lot of exposure. The fact too, though, is that he also has Pluto in that eighth house cusp, and that could suggest a death from a virus. Now, the thing about it too is he also has Uranus in that eighth house, in Uranus and Leo in that eighth house. Now, somebody that's got Uranus in the eighth house, Uranus by itself can be in the eighth house. Uranus in the eighth house by itself can be an indicator of dying through some unanticipated manner, for some unusual, very spontaneous manner. But you're talking about in Leo, it could be on a larger scale, on something that's very little bit more dramatic and gets a little bit more may have potential to get more publicity, sadly, and notoriety, being in Leo. So. And speaking of Leo, it was interesting too that his moon being in Leo. Notice a lot of the big time celebrities and singers, they have that moon in Leo, and a lot of people will talk about, well, my son is in Leo, and this and that. I have, this, I have propensity to be, or I have great potential to be an actor and actress. But a lot of these people got this moon in Leo. I believe Tom Cruise has his moon in Leo, if I'm not mistaken. I think Tom Hanks may have it as well. Clint Eastwood has his moon in Leo. I mean, Leo, of course, is the sign of the entertainer, so it shows that Sun and Capricorn energy, that want, the basic want for ambitions and in career-related matters, going into being injected into that moon in Leo energy, those ambitions going into the entertainment sphere and wanting perhaps to be publicly recognized as an entertainer and performer. The public is that public life is really, it's interesting because it's such a contrast from his Capricorn sun, because Capricorn sun is usually, it can be very introspective and very reserved and has a lot of and really might be limited in who they have their contacts with, because they could be so skeptical and cynical. They're like Scorpio that way. But when you look at it, and because they're so dominated by their business and their career related matters, but having the moon in Leo, well, it shows that at least on an unconscious level, he can exhibit a lot more extroverted qualities and might be a lot more flamboyant due to this than the typical, or was more flamboyant than and gregarious and extroverted than the typical Sun and Capricorn. But now going to some transits in his, well, I want to talk something else about his natal chart. He also had North Node and the midheaven in Libra, and of course having the North Node in Libra, that could be about one's future and destiny, and being in Libra, something that's connected with the arts, and I would say that could be that can include singing as well. And you're talking about also having the midheaven in Libra, so it's not surprising he did something with his career that was associated with that, with singing as well. And singing, I mean, can be associated with Libra. It's also in that solar sunrise chart, he also had the ruler of the 10th house in the first house. So that could indicate that could suggest that somebody's career ambitions and attaining notoriety, recognition can be seen likely on a first impression. And that ruler was Venus in Capricorn. So the Venus in Capricorn can manifest in being able to do so in a very, very consistent manner and making money and do it through the enjoyment of being consistent, being disciplined, ambitious, being structured, and making. And Venus is of course about making money, so it's not surprised that he was able to generate a fairly, I would say, more than a fairly good income through his career ambitions by being consistent, by through structure, through discipline. It wouldn't surprise me if he had some kind of business along with it, with having the Sun and Venus being in Capricorn. So he might have been making money through some business, but I haven't really researched him that extensively to know that or not. Now, he also, at the time when he passed away, he had a number of Capricorn transits hitting the first house of the physical body. Transit Pluto in Capricorn. When you have transit Pluto in the first house, sometimes that can be an indicator of death, because the first house is connected with the physical body. Pluto is, of course, associated with death. Now, also, that the thing about this as well, looking at the chart, and also having transit, you're looking at transit Jupiter in that first house as well. Now, Jupiter, I've talked about in previous videos, could be very strongly benign and benevolent, but could also have a tendency to enlarge and expand. Now, it may have, I don't know this for a fact, but it wouldn't surprise me if it might have enlarged certain Capricorn issues, like maybe there may have been problems with the knees or the bones, the joints, the hamstrings as well, given that we're talking about the transit Jupiter, the first house, the physical body. And anyway, there's really not much more I want to say as far as that goes. I mean, his chart. Well, another thing I noticed, though, is that he did at the time, he had transit Chiron in the third house. And again, the third house can be associated with breathing, and Chiron can sometimes manifest in sometimes physical wounds. It's not just about emotional suffering, tribulation, and adversity. It can be about, it can sometimes manifest in certain physical issues as well. And it's not surprising when we look at, I mean, I'm sorry, I want to go, back to another thing. I'm going off on the Gemini moon tangent here. He also, in the solar sunrise chart, had Saturn in the 12th house. So it could tell me if he was really feeling despondent about these things, he might have been burying those sorrows in solitude and seclusion. He may not have really wanted too many people to know that he was, if he was feeling any kind of dejection or sorrow or feeling despondent because of the situation, he likely didn't want people to really know about this too much. I have Saturn in the 12th house in my natal chart, as many of you may know, and my sorrows are often dealt very privately, in secrecy and solitude and seclusion. So I can empathize and relate if that indeed was what he was actually doing. But anyway, and another thing too, what I wanted to get at as far as this goes, I want to just end this with just to kind of reiterate what I've been saying in some of the other videos about this coronavirus. I notice it's interesting is that, I mean, you have, of course, the transit Neptune in Pisces, which could manifest in diseases that can't be eradicated or destroyed, and might have to do. I mean, Pisces is also associated with mucus. That's part of the issue with this as well. You also have, and then the Pluto being in Capricorn right now, and Pluto can be about viruses, and you have transit Jupiter, very close proximity to it, so Jupiter can enlarge and expand these issues with viruses, and also enlarge and expand death in the process as well, and in causing really a lot of feelings of feeling melancholy and despondent. It has a lot of depressing energy since we're talking about Capricorn. It's not surprising also, of course, you have transit Chiron being in Aries. And Chiron, as I've stated previously, and I'm sure you've heard from other astrologers and other books and manuals, whatever you get your astro information from, is that Chiron can manifest in physical problems as well, physical issues. And being in Aries, Chiron and Aries, you might see a greater proliferation of people that have some kind of issues with fevers, and I would say even rashes, perhaps as well. And you're talking about these fevers being associated or can be a symptom of the coronavirus. You also have transit Black Moon Lilith in Aries, and the Black Moon Lilith can be about suffering, and you're talking about Aries again being associated with fevers. So this is something, so it's not really that surprising when you're seeing these transits and how it's all there. Those transits are all happening concurrently and simultaneously, and a lot of it, and astrologically, I think a lot of this is connected with the coronavirus. But anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. And until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.